try and look what I won.
Wow, what'd you win that for?
For having the best pig in the competition.
Wait, you bred a pig?
Sure did. Most genetically perfect one in the contest.
Oink. Oh my god!
Yes, he's something, isn't he?
Whenever people bring up the term phrase survival horror, the big examples I see in here are either Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Two games that rightfully did shape up the genre back during the PS1 and PS2 days of gaming. They left a big impact when they first released, and to this day, still managed to be some of the best games during that time, if not of all time, by many people. However, back during those days when I was a little kid, if you shown me those two games, I would probably crap my pants all over like Neil Patrick Harris in A Million Ways to Die in the West. It could take a while, trust me. It took Neil Patrick Harris 2 minutes tops. I never played Silent Hill, nor did I ever go through any of the original Resi titles back then. Who knows, maybe I'll go into more detail when I do a video about a Resident Evil game, or even play a Silent Hill game sometime in the future, but that won't be for a while. Instead, I want to talk about another horror game that was released the exact same time as those games were, and didn't really get as popular as those games as well. That, of course, is Manhunt, a survival horror game developed by Rockstar and released in 2003. And yes, that Rockstar, aka the same Rockstar that developed and published the Grand Theft Auto series. Back when the game first came out, it definitely grew some controversy by the mass media because of its violence. You know, now after thinking about it, it's amazing how far Rockstar has come in terms of controversy. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure people still have a problem with Grand Theft Auto nowadays, but back then, almost every game Rockstar made would cause some kind of problem. Obviously, with GTA having you run people over with cars and killing pedestrians, bully as the name suggests and having you kiss a boy, and in the Manhunt series' case, the amount of violence it has. But I'll talk about that later. Despite the controversy though, Manhunt was released to some pretty good reception, but compared to the last two GTA games at the time, that being GTA 3 and Vice City, which were met with unanimous acclaim, it didn't leave that much of a huge impression on most. I know it seems a bit unfair to compare a survival horror game to an open-world crime game, but then again, Rockstar is known for lumping in all their games, and partially at least, the same universe, so it's not too far off to compare. In fact, not a lot of people talk about this game minus the controversy surrounding the game's violence, which is a shame because in terms of what the game is trying to convey, it deserves a lot more credit than how many it has now. The game opens up with news of our main protagonist, James Earl Cash, who was supposed to be sentenced to execution, but instead was lethally injected and knocked out, waking up to an empty room. Followed that with a voice from an earpiece who is actually a film director named Lionel Starkweather and forces Cash to participate in a snuff film. For those of you who don't know, a snuff film is a movie that features real-life killings, and that's really about it in terms of the plot, because the rest of the game, you're just following along with what Starkweather wants you to do up until there's an ambush where you're supposed to die. But since this is a video game and you're the main protagonist, you end up killing everyone and going after Starkweather, killing him in the process. As short and very little the story has to offer though, one thing I love about Manhunt is its world building. The whole entire game is trying to show you how evil and corrupted the town of Carcer City, the game's main location, truly is. Cash is a murderer, going around and killing everyone even if he is being forced to. Starkweather, as stated before, is known for directing snuff films, and even the gangs have done some really messed up stuff. In fact, as the game progresses, the more insane the enemies become. From typical street thugs, to white supremacists and racists, to sexual predators, and even the mentally insane with guys wearing smiling masks. Nowadays they look silly, but back then this was a scary thing to witness in 2003. And you have to remember, these aren't zombies, monsters, or creatures you're fighting. These are actual human beings that are out to kill you, and they won't stop until you are taken down. Or you take them down, one of the two really. Even the police officers are corrupted since they're under the binding of Starkweather. The whole game shows that almost everyone here are kind of screwed up with the brain. Even the news reporter named Reporter, Yeah, she doesn't actually have a name, and the game just teases us with it around the end. Even she ends up going insane around the end of the game. Oh yeah, I forgot to bring her up, mostly because of the fact that she barely does anything in the game. She does try to get the scoop of Starkweather, but besides escorting her to her home in one of the missions, she shows up and becomes obsolete. The only way to know any information about this whole mess is by going to the game's website to know more about it. I wish there were unlockables around the end or files scattered around the area so we can learn more about these characters and how crazy or demented they became. Sort of like how Resident Evil does it. Or you can always look it up online. I'm sure that's what the kids are doing nowadays. But regardless, Manhunt still does a pretty good job conveying this. True, you could make the argument that you don't need files or any background information about these characters. All you need to know is how they are now and what kind of sick twisted schemes they have in store. I don't know, if the game gave us something more to go by, then the story and world building probably could have been even better. Don't take what I say out of context though, I still think the world building in Manhunt is interesting enough already. I just wish we could get more out of it. And I haven't even begun to talk about the game as a whole. One thing I want to compliment the game for is its art direction. Manhunt is a good looking game for 2003. Yes, at times it shows its age, but the models still look really good. Hell, I'd argue they look better than any of the PS2 GTA games. And the levels themselves are great for its dark, gritty environments and capitalizing on the horror aspect that Manhunt has with having claustrophobic environments at certain occasions. In fact, at certain times, I was getting either Resident Evil or Silent Hill vibes playing this game. Carcer City feels like I'm in Raccoon City from Resident Evil 2, the zoo in Starkweather's Garden Center feels like I'm in Silent Hill, and Starkweather's mansion is very reminiscent of the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil 1. It definitely seems like those games were the main source of inspiration for this game's locales and environments. And the soundtrack is a no-brainer as well, being inspired by classic 80s slasher horror movies such as Halloween or Friday the 13th. And the soundtrack balancing is excellent too. There can be no sound, just the sound of Cash's heart beating rapidly as he's near an enemy. Then the music ramps up, but very slightly as enemies search for you. And when they spot you, the music blasts and the suspense and tension comes into full play. Though there is a weird audio glitch in the PC version where an audio track would just loop non-stop until I died. And the first 2 times it happened, it was either a man taking a dump or a German porn video playing in the background. No, I am not making that up, nor am I going to play them for you guys because I had to hear it for so many times I might start to get a migraine. But overall, Manhunt nails in its presentation and is without a doubt the highlight for this game in my opinion. However, this is where I start to let loose a bit here for the gameplay. As much as I enjoy the presentation and world that Manhunt has, the gameplay is rough around the edges. The game serves as a stealth-based game, as in you hide around the shadows and wait until the enemies turn their backs on you, and then you execute them from behind. That's literally 75% of the entire game. The other 25% results in the shooting sections, but I'll get to those in a bit. The stealth sections are pretty basic when you take into consideration, because literally all you're doing is just hiding and trying to get the enemy's attention. You could hit a wall or throw an object at a wall to get their attention, and wait until they're near you and perform an execution. By the way, the executions in this game are pretty brutal, or at least for the time. Nowadays, it's pretty common for video games to be violent, and compared to games I play like Doom Eternal, the violence in Manhunt 1 isn't anything special. But back then, in 2003, I could definitely see why people had a problem with it. It's not as bad as Manhunt 2's violence, but it's still pretty graphic. Every time you perform an execution, it shows it up close and personal with static cameras indicating that, yes, Starkweather is recording this, and yes, he is getting off of it. Literally, he gets off of this stuff according to the game's dialogue. You can perform different type of executions depending on the weapon. Some of them are pretty tame a bit, but the more you hold down the button, the more gruesome the executions are. You can choke someone with a baseball bat and then knock their head off. You can open someone's stomach with a sickle, cut someone's head off with a chainsaw. The executions in Manhunt are really graphic, in case you couldn't tell. I don't even think I should be showing you this because YouTube and COPA might be on me. COPA virus. But as gruesome as the executions are, they tend to get repetitive since you're going to be doing the same executions over and over and over again at certain points. They might be more graphic for the first time, but the more times you do it, they get tiring. Thankfully, you can swap weapons and see what other new weapons of executions you can do. And at the end of every mission, you are given a rank depending on the time you complete the mission and the variety of executions you perform. This game is pretty damn hard though. You can perform hand-to-hand combat, but it's wise to not take on 2 guys at once because then you'll get swarmed and beaten pretty quickly, and your health meter drains faster than my own dignity, so be careful, and don't be like me and just run off willy-nilly like a moron. Not that it matters, because hand-to-hand isn't really all that good. Combat feels stiff, and it's hard to get a hit when you're flinching back from the enemies, so it's best to run away and hide in the shadows again. And as I alluded to before, Manhunt also has these shooting sections that you are forced to participate in. It's almost as hard as fighting someone in hand-to-hand, and much like fighting someone in hand-to-hand, shooting also feels very clunky. The controls are a bit of a mess when you're planning on shooting enemies, and I'm playing this on a keyboard and mouse too. During these shooting sections, you have to hide behind cover and wait for the enemies to pop out for you to shoot them. The problem is that you can't kill them from so far away, even when you're aiming down your sights or having the reticle on them. You have to get as close as possible for you to get a hit, and even then, it's like trying to draw the right card in Duel Monsters. You might hit the guy, or you might not. But at the end of the day, you get too cocky, and your butt is toast. And the game, I believe, uses tank controls as well, sort of like Resident Evil, but instead of turning your character when you push left and right, you're strafing. And you can only turn by rotating the camera because the camera is automatically locked behind cache for the rest of the game. So in other words, Manhunt did the whole third-person tank control only a year and a half before Resident Evil 4 did, but Resi 4 definitely improved on this greatly. You also have boss fights as well, one with Ramirez, Starkweather's right-hand man, but all you have to do is just shoot at the guy and that's it. Pixie, who is a naked man wearing pigskin on his face, yes I did just say that, in which you have to hide in the shadows and stab him with a wooden spike 3 times before cutting his damn hands off with a chainsaw and watch him fall and hit the ground. And Starkweather, in which you cut open his stomach and shove a chainsaw down his body. Okay, I know this is supposed to be a commentary about violence in video games, but maybe you're going a little bit overboard with this one, guys. Really, at the end of the day, Manhunt is a game that kind of hasn't aged all that well. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad game, but due to how repetitive and boring the gameplay gets with you either hiding and executing enemies, or these god-awful shooting sections, it can be really draining. But I still think it would be interesting if we can learn more about the world. I doubt Rockstar is considering continuing this franchise, especially after the controversy of the second game, but due to how easy violence is on video games nowadays, maybe they could pull off a third game. If you are interested in Manhunt though, you can buy it on the PS2, PS3, PS4, original Xbox, or PC. But be warned about the PC version. If you have Windows Vista or higher, then you're practically doomed unless you have a mod having the game run on your computer, because this game can only run on Windows 2000 and XP only. But if you do get it to run then maybe you might have a good time playing it. I like the idea of the characters and story, and the gameplay is also a nice idea, but is way too basic for my liking, and some elements should really need to be worked on a bit more. With that said, there's also a sequel that came out 4 years later, but I'm not going to focus on that game right now. I feel like if I do back-to-back on 2 violent video games in a row, that would probably put me in a bat light on YouTube, even though I am there already. But regardless, if you are a huge fan of survival horror and want to try out some horror games you never played, try out Manhunt if you can. I know he stated the gameplay hasn't aged, but at least the story and characters are worth checking out, and hopefully we can convince Rockstar that a third game can be possible, if done right. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you haven't seen my last video, I took a look at Agents of Mayhem, a video game developed by the same guys who made the Saints Row series, Volition. Honestly, I'm actually proud of that video and how it turned out, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video as well. Also, I will be on Twitch live streaming, of course, so whenever I can, I'll be streaming some video games. With that said, thanks for watching, stay safe, wash your hands, and lastly, have a nice day.